Hey, Joe. What? Apologize. No. You can't do this, man. He's biting my nuts.
Giudice opening up about his upcoming 41-month prison sentence that starts March 23rd in New Jersey.
Joe Giudice, charm on camera, crimes off it. He was the funny, tough-talking husband who seemed to bring the drama to the real Housewives of New Jersey. But behind the Bravo spotlight was a darker reality, one built on fraud, deception, and a trail of legal disasters. In this video, we're walking through the full downfall, from suspicious loans and federal indictments to prison, deportation, and his endless appeals to claw his way back. This is not just a story of a reality star gone wrong. It's a story of schemes, guilty pleas, and the humiliating slide from television celebrity to convicted felon. Stay tuned, because by the end, you'll see how Joe's life became a timeline of fraud, courtrooms, and public begging for a comeback that never truly came. Before RHONJ made him a household name, Joe Giudice painted himself as the all-American success story. He ran small construction businesses, dabbled in real estate, and always claimed to be hustling for his family. When Bravo introduced Teresa and Joe in 2009, viewers saw the perfect setup: a flashy house, big spending, and Joe as the strong, traditional provider. Reality TV gave Joe something he had never had before: a stage. The cameras turned his family into celebrities and his image into a brand. Suddenly, his businesses looked more legitimate, his lifestyle looked more enviable, and the Giudices became symbols of Jersey luxury. But here's the truth: that aura of success was smoke and mirrors. The very foundation of Joe's fame, the big house, the cars, the so-called wealth, was built on lies and financial fraud. While the show sold the audience a fantasy of trust and prosperity, Joe was already hiding the cracks in his empire. He wasn't building a legacy, he was building a house of cards. Long before federal agents came knocking, Joe Giudice's finances didn't add up. On paper, he claimed to be a successful businessman with steady income and valuable assets. But when you looked closer, the numbers told a different story. Loan applications were padded with inflated earnings. Bankruptcy filings left out key information, and debts quietly piled up while Joe kept flaunting his lifestyle on TV. Insiders began whispering that something was off. Local businesses complained of unpaid bills, creditors noticed delays and strange filings, and tabloids picked up the trail, pointing out the gap between Joe's supposed fortune and the reality of his shaky businesses. These weren't just minor oversights. This was a pattern. Hiding liabilities, exaggerating wealth, and creating a fake financial image. Joe wasn't just living beyond his means, he was laying the groundwork for criminal charges. By 2013, the whispers turned into sirens. Federal prosecutors unsealed a sweeping indictment against Joe and Teresa Giudice, charging them with mail fraud, wire fraud, bank fraud, and bankruptcy fraud. The glamorous Bravo couple were no longer just reality stars. They were accused criminals facing the fight of their lives. The indictment read like a playbook of deception: falsified loan documents, fake tax returns, hidden assets during bankruptcy. In plain terms, Joe had created a false empire, tricking banks and the government while living large in front of millions of viewers. The same hands that signed Bravo contracts also signed fraudulent documents. The fallout was immediate. Headlines plastered their faces across every news site. Fans were stunned. How could the authentic Jersey family be living such a lie? But the truth was clear. The luxury cars, the mansion, the endless spending sprees weren't funded by hustle or hard work. They were financed by crime. The glamorous life had a price tag, and now the bill had arrived. In 2014, the facade finally collapsed. Joe Giudice stood in federal court and admitted what so many had suspected. He wasn't a savvy businessman, he was a fraud. Alongside Teresa, he pled guilty to multiple counts of bankruptcy fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, and failing to pay taxes. It wasn't just a technicality or an accounting slip, it was deliberate deception. What mattered most was the contrast. On screen, Joe boasted about being tough, independent, and self-made. In the courtroom, he was forced to admit he had faked documents, lied to banks, and cheated the system. The guilty plea shattered the successful businessman story he had been selling to fans for years. No amount of bravado could cover up the reality. Joe was a convicted felon. The sentence was brutal but deserved. Joe Giudice was handed 41 months in federal prison, while Teresa was given 15 months. To allow one parent to stay with their children, the judge staggered their sentences. Teresa went first, and then Joe surrendered. For a man who once strutted on TV as the man of the house, the transition was humiliating. From boss to inmate, Joe traded flashy cars and fine dining for prison khakis and a bunk bed. He lost his freedom, his reputation, and the respect he once demanded. The ripple effects hit hardest at home. Teresa became the face of the scandal while caring for 4 daughters alone. The children endured public shame and emotional pain. Their father's crimes splashed across headlines. For all the excuses Joe made, the damage fell hardest on the very people he claimed he was providing for. So, what exactly did Joe do? The fraud wasn't complicated, it was deliberate. Joe and Teresa submitted false loan applications, lying about their income to qualify for big mortgages and business loans. They filed for bankruptcy, hiding assets like cars and properties to dodge paying debts. They inflated their earnings on paper, then lived large with money they never truly had. Some people shrug this off as shady business. But this wasn't bending the rules. It was breaking the law. Banks and lenders lost real money. Creditors were left unpaid. The system that honest families rely on to buy homes and start businesses was cheated for Joe's personal gain. The impact was clear. Financial institutions lost millions, and the example set was toxic. Instead of building wealth through hard work, Joe showed the world how to fake it until you get caught. Behind the drama and reality TV glitz, real victims paid the price for his greed. As if the fraud convictions weren't enough, Joe Giudice's financial mess extended straight into the world of taxes. The IRS came knocking with liens tied to unpaid income taxes and shady business filings. Year after year, the Giudices were hit with claims showing that not only were they lying to banks, they were also lying to the government about what they owed. The fallout drained every resource. Settlements, fines, and mounting legal fees stripped away the very lifestyle Joe once flaunted. The mansion, the cars, the luxury image, all of it became financial deadweight. What viewers saw on Bravo was the illusion of success. But behind the scenes, the family was drowning in debt. It didn't just affect Joe. The tax liens and court judgments dragged Teresa and the children into financial chaos. The RHONJ franchise itself took a hit, with sponsors backing away and fans questioning if the Giudices should even be on TV while owing so much to the system they cheated. Joe's crimes weren't victimless. They destroyed his family's stability and their public brand. For Joe Giudice, prison wasn't the end of his punishment. Because he was never a U.S. citizen, his felony convictions triggered automatic deportation proceedings. While serving his sentence, immigration authorities made it clear once his prison term ended, he wasn't going back home to Jersey. He was being sent out of the country. In 2019, after months of appeals and delays, Joe was removed from the United States and sent to Italy. The tough guy who once bragged about running his household was escorted out, not as a star, but as a deportee. His life was uprooted in the harshest, most public way. The humiliation was undeniable. Joe went from the flashy patriarch of a Bravo dynasty to a man forced to start over in a country he hadn't lived in since childhood. His American dream was gone, undone by his own crimes. Deportation wasn't just a punishment, it was a statement that his actions had long-lasting, irreversible consequences. Joe didn't take deportation quietly. He launched appeal after appeal, begging courts to let him stay in America with his family. He tried every legal angle, from claiming hardship to asking judges for mercy. But the results were the same, rejection after rejection. He even took his case to higher appellate courts, hoping for a miracle. But the law was clear. Convicted felons who aren't citizens don't get to stay. Each failed petition only emphasized the reality. Joe wasn't coming back. The image that emerged was pitiful. Once a man who acted invincible, Joe was now reduced to begging the system he had spent years defrauding. What once looked like swagger came across as desperation. Every court defeat stripped away another layer of his bravado, leaving nothing but the truth. Joe Giudice had played the game, and the game beat him. After exhausting every appeal, Joe Giudice shifted to a new strategy: political theater. His family launched public campaigns, petitions, and even floated the idea of asking for a presidential pardon. Social media became a stage for begging and spin, with hashtags and interviews pleading for justice. as if deportation was some unfair punishment rather than the direct result of years of crime. But instead of showing humility, Joe's behavior screamed entitlement. He wasn't apologizing to the victims of his fraud. He wasn't showing accountability for his actions. He was asking for a free pass. The optics were terrible, a convicted felon demanding special treatment after lying, cheating, and stealing. It wasn't remorse, it was desperation. The message was clear. Joe wanted the rules bent in his favor, but the same system he scammed wasn't going to bail him out. Once in Italy, Joe quickly leaned into publicity. High-profile interviews with Bravo, staged sit-downs with Andy Cohen, Instagram posts showing him starting fresh. Joe never missed a chance to put himself back in the spotlight. Instead of quietly rebuilding, he leaned into being a spectacle. The problem? Much of it came across as tone-deaf. Smiling selfies from Italy while his family was fractured in New Jersey. Casual comments about moving on while fans remembered the fraud and deportation. His poor me narrative clashed with the fact that he alone created this mess. To many, it felt calculated. Joe wanted sympathy without accountability. He wanted relevance without responsibility. The irony was painful. The man who once avoided taxes and lied to banks now wanted fans to feel sorry for him. Joe's crimes didn't just sink him, they dragged Teresa and the entire Real Housewives of New Jersey brand through the mud. What was once Bravo's crown jewel franchise turned into a courtroom soap opera. Sponsors grew wary of associating with a show tied to federal fraud and deportation headlines. For Teresa, the cost was enormous. She served her own prison sentence, shouldered the humiliation, and had to rebuild her reputation while raising 4 children alone. The Giudice name became shorthand for scandal, not luxury. Even for Bravo, the glow wore off. Viewers tuned in for drama, yes, but seeing a family's life implode under fraud charges and deportation wasn't entertaining. It was ugly. The long-term effect? The franchise's reputation was stained, and no amount of spin could separate RHONJ from the crimes of Joe Giudice. When people talk about Joe Giudice, too often it gets reduced to celebrity drama. But strip away the Bravo cameras and you see the truth. There were real victims. Banks and lenders lost millions of dollars because Joe faked income and hid assets. Small business partners and local creditors were left unpaid while he flaunted designer clothes and expensive cars. Even employees tied to his construction businesses were caught in the fallout of his shady financial practices. This wasn't just about a Bravo star's reputation, it was about financial ruin and broken trust. Regular people, playing by the rules, ended up footing the bill for Joe's lies. That's the part fans don't always see behind the tabloid headlines. The harm wasn't entertainment, it was criminal damage. What's most telling about Joe Giudice isn't just the fraud itself, it's the way he handled the consequences. Over and over, he relied on the same tactics: deny, deflect, and blame others. He blamed stress, he blamed the system, he blamed lawyers, and even Teresa. He framed himself as a victim of bad luck instead of the architect of his own downfall. That's the pattern: never full accountability, always an excuse. From shady loan applications to failed appeals, Joe behaved as if rules were optional and consequences unfair. His story isn't one of one-time mistakes. It's a consistent character flaw. At the end of the day, Joe Giudice's dark side left scars on more than just his own life. He destroyed trust, dragged his family into scandal, and permanently stained a TV franchise. He lost his freedom, his home, his reputation, and even his place in the country he called home. And here's the hard truth. It wasn't bad luck, it wasn't a conspiracy, it was his choices. Choices that ruined lives, drained finances, and ended with him deported and disgraced. So the question is, should public forgiveness ever be possible for someone like Joe Giudice? Or has he burned every bridge by refusing to own his crimes? Check the court records, read the sentencing documents, and form your own opinion. But don't be fooled by the charm or the Bravo cameras. This is the real story, the dark side of Joe Giudice. And if you want more deep dives into the scandals behind reality TV, hit subscribe and stay tuned for the next expose.